Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Was in Pokemon Movie. Before we start, please go support marioiale for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Naruto is a male. Chapter 1, Home Sweet Home. I don't know Naruto or Pokemon. Wow, today's the day! A young girl with hair as vibrant as a Charmander's tail smiled as she looked up at her parents. I can't believe it's today! I've been waiting so long! Her violet eyes, a shade she shared with her mother, sparkled with the same innocence and determination any young trainer would have as she sped toward the large lab on the hill, her windmill looking even more appealing than usual. Slow down, Mito. The girl's father smiled at his baby and took her hand, ruffling her hair as he pouted. Her mother took Mito's other hand. Pokemon aren't going anywhere, and Professor Oak promised to let you have a Charmander. Namikaze Kushina couldn't help but smile at how giddy and excited her daughter was. She was acting much more childish and innocent than her older brother. And we're still early. The official start of Pokemon Starter Day isn't in another 20 minutes. Mito was still pouting. I just want to meet my Charmander faster. Namikaze Minato shared a smile with his wife before stroking his daughter's head. Be patient, Mito. I'm sure you and your Charmander will love each other, just like your brother and his did. Mito smiled. I hope so. Every year, Professor Oak, the foremost expert in Pokemon research, was in charge of giving new trainers their starter Pokemon. According to tradition, trainers in the Kanto region had the choice of a Charmander, a Bulbasaur, or a Squirtle, a fire type, a grass type, and a water type, respectively. So, every year on that same day, many young aspiring trainers would visit Pallet Town to receive their first Pokemon from Professor Oak. It would be the first of many steps on the path to becoming a Pokemon trainer, and like many others, Namikaze Mito was officially beginning her journey. She had waited with great anticipation. Ever since she first saw Professor Oak give away starters a year ago, she had been counting down the days. And after 365 pieces of chocolate, one each day, her day finally arrived. Although the girl was ecstatic, her parents were not so comfortable. Kushina looked at her husband, looked into his azure eyes, both conveying a silent message. They were both worried. Mito wasn't like her extremely determined and cultured brother, whose sole purpose was to become the strongest. While Mito enjoyed her time with her pet Natsu, a young Growlithe, and played with her friends, her brother was reading dozens upon dozens of books on Pokemon and battle strategy. By the time he was 10, he had been surpassed by most of the other graduate students. Before he'd even received his Charmander, he'd already planned out what Pokemon he needed to catch and where he'd catch them. He had team lists he designed for every gym in Kanto, and even the Johto region. The boy had even planned out a schedule for when he needed to train to battle the Elite Four. He was in a class of his own, and Mito. Deep down, Kushina and Minato felt a little relieved that only one of their babies had such aggressive determination. While they were extremely proud of what their son had accomplished at such a young age, they knew what he went through in the process. You know, Mito, honey, you don't have to be a Pokemon trainer. Kushina did her best to look innocent as she casually spoke her mind. You could always be more like your mother and become a Pokemon coordinator. We aren't as violent as trainers, and instead of hurting your Pokemon in battle, we make them really cute and pretty and have them perform amazing works of art. I know, Mom, but I want to try being a trainer first. Naruna is a trainer and I want to see what she's really like. Minato put an arm around his wife's shoulders and kissed her cheek. It's okay, he whispered. She's our daughter, she'll be fine. He looked down at his baby, who was still dazed and unconscious. She's a smart and strong girl, just like her mother. Kushina sighed and leaned against her husband. I guess so. It was a wonder in itself that Mito had such a normal childhood. As the daughter of Beneheim and Kuroi Senko, she was very lucky that pesky reporters didn't know about her or her small home in Pallet Town. Kushina Namikaze wasn't a simple coordinator with several ribbons. She was the international champion with complete collections of ribbons from every region. From Kanto to Kalos, almost everyone, at one point or another, would have heard about the beauty of Beneheim and her Pokemon. Specializing in the color red, she outshone all her competition with her flawless technique and unique style. Kushina had been voted the most beautiful woman alive for 3 years in a row at the height of her career and was sought after by countless suitors all over the world. And 22 years ago, Kuroi Senko, a man many people were initially confused by. but after the Hiraishin teleportation systems were installed in every Pokemon Center, Pokemart, and research facility around the world, everyone knew the name Kuroi Senko. Minato Namikaze had single-handedly changed the world with his invention and reaffirmed reality in the Pokemon world. Thanks to Hiraishin, the number of Pokemon saved, the number of products sold, and countless other statistics increased dramatically. He was personally proud that there was a 90% increase in Pokemon saved around the world. Perhaps it was his love for Pokemon, his passion for improving lives, or his beauty, but he managed to snag Kushina and made her his wife. The world was shocked by the announcement, but unfortunately for the press and fortunately for the newlyweds, that was the last the press heard of them. Kushina retired from professional competition, and Minato moved out of his research center, never to be heard from again. Well, until a few years ago. Come on, Mom, Dad! Mito dragged his parents as they reached the front of the lab. We're here, Kushina smiled. Don't run up the stairs, Mito. There was already a mass of people around the lab, most of them parents of the other children waiting for the professor. All of Oak's apprentices and assistants were busy running around the place, and his 2 grandchildren were also present. Daisy Oak was busy preparing the Pokemon in the lab, making them all as happy as possible. Gary Oak, on the other hand, was busy talking to a group of girls. After deciding to end his Pokemon training career a year ago and start his life as a researcher, he had been helping his grandfather in the lab. Pallet Town was currently becoming increasingly lively. Hey, Kushina, Minato! The kind mother smiled at Mito. And hello, Mito! Hello, Aunt Delia! The Namikaze smiled at their sweet neighbor. Hey, Delia! Kushina approached her best friend of 20 years with a beautiful smile. Are you here too? Ash came home last night. Delia smiled excitedly, making her friends smile. He finished his journey in the Hoenn region and came back with some of his friends. Professor Birch, May, and Max came to visit him along with Misty and Brock. It's like a reunion today, Minato smiled. That sounds great. Where is Ash? Kushina asked. This way, Aunt Kushina. Ash Ketchum, a 14-year-old boy who grew up in the house next door to the Namikaze, ran up to his aunt and uncle. Uncle Minato! The boy had grown quite a bit since he left 4 years ago on his journey and was now shoulder height to Minato. He still wore the same style of clothing, making Namikaze smile at his innocence. And Mito! Wow, I can't believe you already have your Pokemon. That's it, Ash. Mito smiled at her childhood friend, who was still taller than her. And hello, Pikachu! The electric mouse Pokemon chirped and jumped into the girl's arms. Tika, Pikachu, Uncle, Aunt, let me introduce you. Ash gestured to his friends with a smile. This is May and Max, the son and daughter of Normal, the gym leader of the Petalburg Gym. And I believe you've already met Misty and Brock. Nice to meet you all. Minato replied with a charming smile. Hello again, Mr. and Mrs. Namikaze, said Misty and Brock. Kushina nodded, but raised an eyebrow when she noticed May gaping at her with wide eyes. Her jaw hung open as she trembled in shock at the sight of Kushina, the baby Squirtle in her arms staring at her in confusion. Max was also confused at first, but soon realized what her sister noticed, and her jaw promptly dropped. Why you? May slowly raised a finger. Why you are KK Kushina Yuzi. My name is Kushina Namikaze now, darling. Misty and Brock laughed at their reactions. They were the same people they'd been when they'd first arrived in Pallet Town with Ash a few years ago. It was very hard to believe that the most celebrated Pokemon coordinator and the richest scientist in the world lived so simply in a small town, as Ash's next-door neighbor, no less. Misty still remembered asking Kushina for some beauty tips, and she still uses the techniques she learned that day. Perhaps she could get May to ask her for some advice so she could listen. She didn't want to ask a second time. And of course, as an aspiring Pokemon breeder and doctor, Brock respected Minato enormously. He was so jealous that Ash grew up alongside such amazing people. Max gulped and looked at Minato. So that must mean you're Minato Namikaze? The blonde chuckled. Yes, I am Max. It's a pleasure to meet you. The boy shakes his idol's hand. And nice to meet you too, sir. I can't believe it. May shouted loudly, making her friends shudder. I've seen all of your performances on TV and I love them all. May shook Kushina's hand with both of her hands, making the lady giggle at how cute she was. Where have you been for the past 20 years? Oh my God, You still look so beautiful and magnificent. Minato chuckled and pulled his wife closer. Yes, it is, Mito choked and shook her head. Can we get our Pokemon now? Can I have your autograph? Mei asked, a little calmer after Ash shushed her. Kushina smiled. Of course, Mei. Mei was practically gushing. I want to be a Pokemon coordinator too, and it's a true honor to meet you, Ms. Namikaze. She looked at the girl who looked slightly younger than her and looked like a mini version of Kushina. And this must be your daughter. She's really pretty too. Max blushed a little as she looked at Mito. Sorry, I'm rambling. It's okay, baby. Kushina signed Mei's notepad and smiled as she hugged it tightly. And I'll give you some advice later. Mei was about to faint and couldn't even respond. So, how was the Hoenn region, Ash? Minato asked with a small smile. I heard there are a lot of amazing Pokemon there. It was really amazing, man. I love the Hoenn region. Ash smiled at Mei and Max. We made some great friends there and added some strong members to our teams. The boy was so excited that it made Minato and Kushina smile. I'll show you later in the lab. Great, I'll show you some new inventions too. Max almost fainted. See, can I go too? Minato chuckled and patted Max's head. Of course, Max. Okay, everyone, came Professor Oak's voice. Please make your way inside in an orderly manner. We have plenty of Pokemon prepared for all the young trainers today. Dressed in his usual lab coat, red shirt, and khaki pants, the professor looked as intellectual and kind as usual, and his smile alone made everyone feel at ease. Follow Daisy, Gary, and me. They will lead you all to the proper places inside. Mito smiled and tugged on her mother's hand. Yeah, let's go. But for some reason, before everyone could reach the doors, the ground began to shake violently. Professor Oak almost fell down the stairs from the small earthquake, and would have if Gary hadn't grabbed his arm in time. Minato took Mito and Kushina in his arms and hugged them tightly, but he was looking around to see what the hell was causing the shaking. Almost the entire crowd fell to the ground and began to stand up and move away from the structures. Ash huddled with his friends while holding his mother, keeping her safe, but the ground wouldn't stop shaking. Slowly, the shaking began to weaken, and the crowd managed to make their way onto the open grassy field. There were still constant tremors, but it was weak enough for most people to stand up. But even from the field, they could see that many things in the lab had fallen and broken, including many bookshelves and even some computers. Even the stacks of poke balls were knocked over and rolling all over the lab floor. All the other apprentices inside the lab ran outside, carrying as many poke balls as they could. Professor, it's happening again! Tracy, one of Ash's traveling companions, rushed out with his sketchbook, pale with shock. But it's even more drastic than before. Now they're using earthquake attacks, Gary groaned. Damn, this is bad. What's going on, Professor? Minato asked. Ash nodded. Yeah, is someone attacking us? Is it Team Rocket again? No, they're some of the Pokemon we have in one of the fields. Professor Oak stood up and dusted his jacket. They're very high-level Pokemon, and we keep them in their own field. It's the largest field we have. It's at the back of the property, and is kept safe and away from all the other Pokemon, but they've started fighting among themselves recently. He looked at Minato and Kushina. We tried calming them down with tranquilizers or the hypnosis attack of other Pokemon, but they're too skilled. We'd already sent over a dozen Alakazam and Gengar at the Pokemon last week, and we still couldn't do anything. The Pokemon we have here aren't trained enough to keep them at bay, even Gary's. Gary sneered. Don't blame me. Whose Pokemon is it? Ash asked, surprised that Gary's Pokemon couldn't do anything. Professor Oak sighed. It's from Naruto. Is it Naranai's? Kushina bit her lip as Minato sighed. It had been quite some time since Naruto had returned home, even to visit his family and Pokemon. It really wasn't a surprise that his Pokemon started fighting. Not only had their master not been there for them for a long time, but the very structure they were trained in would cause them to clash. Naruto built the teams he had designed since he was a child and trained them independently of each other. Each team of 6 had a leader, the strongest of the 6, and they would lead and coordinate the rest of the group. They were formed like cohorts, each with a centurion. And with Pokemon at such high levels, it would be natural for them to clash without their breeder. Ash nodded. Oh, I get it now. No wonder our Pokemon can't do much. Who's that? Mei asked. Mito smiled a little sadly. My older brother. Wait, Max muttered. Wait. The boy was getting louder and more excited. If he's your brother, that means he's your parents' son. Minato and Kushina pursed their lips while Mito sighed. His name is Naruto Namikaze. Oh my god, Naruto Namikaze. It was Max's turn to say. Two thought it was a false rumor, but they said Naruto Namikaze is your son. I can't believe it's actually true. What are you talking about? May asked again. Max just looked at his sister in annoyance. I can't believe you don't recognize the name. Naruto Namikaze, the former champion of the Kanto and Johto region. The girl looked surprised and looked at Minato and Kushina. Champion? Misty and Brock were also surprised. Even they didn't know that Ash knew their region's previous champion. They had never faced Naruto as gym leaders, but they had certainly heard from their respective parents and siblings about how powerful and skilled he was. You mean you really know him, Ash? Why didn't you tell us? You never asked. Ash shrugged before smiling fondly and turning to May. Naruto was the champion after he defeated the Elite Four a few years ago. It had been a long time since Ash had seen his and Gary's childhood hero. Growing up alongside Naruto was amazing. Not only did Ash get to watch him train all of his starter Pokemon, he also learned a lot. Ash will never forget the day he and Gary watched Naruto train two of his teams at once by having them battle each other. It was amazing to see the perfection in the making. He grew up here in Pallet Town, but no one really knows. Max was dizzy and jumping up and down. He's the youngest champion ever. I did a full report on him back at Petalburg School. Professor Oak smiled and nodded. He was only 12 years old when he took the entire region by storm. He defeated every gym in Kanto and Johto before attending the Indigo League, and he beat every opponent he encountered without losing a single Pokemon. And when he was 16, he used his right as the winner of the Indigo League to officially challenge the Elite Four. Only 16? And he won? May was shocked that she had never heard of someone like that before. Yes. Max smiled. It was broadcast live throughout the Kanto and Johto regions and even part of the Hoenn region. I watched it with Dad at home. Gary actually smiled. We all saw it too. The entire village was basically shut down when everyone decided to gather at the town hall to watch Naruto. He defeated Lorelei and Bruno with almost no effort. The young son of Petalburg recited the results as if it were his favorite story. He challenged them to triple battles, which is much harder for a trainer. I thought the Elite Four would destroy him, but somehow he came up with these amazing original attacks and outlasted them. After 4 rounds of triple battles, he defeated the first 2 Elite Four. Minato smiled proudly at his son's accomplishments. Even Agatha, the oldest of the Elite Four, didn't last long against him. She managed to defeat a few of their Pokemon, but he won in the end. Then the 6-on-6 battle against Lance. Ash said excitedly. That was the best thing I've ever seen. I was standing the whole time. Even Dad was cheering alongside me. Max laughed at his sister. To think you and Mom missed it because you went shopping, May snorted as Mito smiled. My favorite is Naranai's chain sky attacks. I prefer his instant attacks. Minato added with a smile. Kushina sneered. You only like that because he named it after you, Hiraishin. Wow, that sounds so amazing. May murmured, wondering how this whole family was so wonderful. Suddenly, the ground started shaking again, even louder than the last time. Everyone immediately sat down in the open field and tried to wait, but the professor and all his assistants were worried about the structure of their lab. Then, to make matters worse, a loud explosion sounded from the distant fields. Bursts of fire and light could be seen from where the people were huddled together, and Pidgey could be seen scattering from the distant woods, all feeling a clash of titans. Other Pokemon from other fields were also starting to jump off their fences and over to where the group was, all trying to flee the battle. Ash and Gary noticed some of their own Pokemon and went to gather them. With 4 dozen Tauros, a large Snorlax, and countless other Pokemon, the situation didn't improve. Now, in the middle of the large grassy clearing, a mass of people and Pokemon gathered, all trying to think of ways to stop the battle before it destroys the lab, or worse, the entire city. Tracy looked terrified. Professor, what should we do? Oak sighed. I really don't know. He looked at Minato, who was also frowning. Can you calm them down? You've met most of them, and they know who you are. Maybe you and Kushina can command them, Minato sighed. It won't work. Naruto's Pokemon will only listen to Naruto. He's trained them to the extreme in that regard. No one but him will ever command them. The father of two could still remember the time when Naruto's Pokemon was guarding one of his labs and some thieves were stupid enough to infiltrate it. Those so-called Team Rocket goons were almost killed by Naruto's Garchomp, and they would have died if Naruto hadn't stopped him in time. Kushina pursed her lips. I'll try calling him again. Her entire family had been trying to reach Naruto for a long time and had been calling his number extensively over the past few weeks. Mito really wanted him to see his first Pokemon, and wanted him to come home for her birthday. The girl herself had called her brother countless times, but unfortunately, no one answered. However, I've been trying to call him for weeks, so don't get your hopes up that he'll answer. With her Pokenav read, Kushina used speed dial number 2 and started it ringing. Yeah, still no answer. I think the battle is coming this way. Ash shouted loudly. A sonic boom nearly knocked everyone off their feet as a Garchomp tore through the skies with a thunderous roar. Its body cast a large shadow across the ground as it spread its wings while staring down its opponent floating a short distance away. An orange energy ball gathered in its mouth before it fired it into the sky. The orb of power shattered into small fragments and fell to earth like meteors. It's Draco Meteor! Minato quickly pulled his wife and daughter closer. We have to run! But the attack wasn't meant for them. An energy blast fired at the enormous Tyranitar standing firm behind the group. The enormous, incredibly strong Pokemon faced the blasts, creating a massive cloud of dust and causing tremors in the ground. It roared back in defiance. It wasn't hurt at all. Its defensive power was too strong. It charged its own orange energy into its mouth, but instead of Draco Meteor, it was Hyper Beam. The devastating beam blew the dust cloud away and shot into the sky, taking some clouds with its power. Garchomp growled and refused to dodge. Instead, he charged up a Dragon Rage attack. The orange and blue beams collided, and a massive shockwave was emitted. Mito was astonished as she looked up to see a maelstrom of energy filling the morning sky. She knew that Garchomp and Tyranitar were no normal Pokemon. They were Pokemon trained by her brother for years, and they had power that was unrivaled in the Kanto and Johto regions. No normal Pokemon could cause such simple destruction. But that realization simply made it clear to her how dangerous the situation truly was. They could destroy Pallet Town on their own, not to mention that Garchomp and Tyranitar were leaders of two of her brother's teams, cohorts, and could command their subordinates if they wanted. Gary stood up and growled. Blastus, use Hydro Pump on Tyranitar! The grandson of Oak's strongest Pokemon was curled up around the group, and aimed its cannons at the largest, strongest, and oldest Pokemon. Explosion! He shouted as he fired 2 streams of water at the ground-type Pokemon. Tyranitar barely paid attention to the incoming attack and dodged it with speed a Pokemon of its size shouldn't have. Gary watched in shock and horror as Tyranitar was covered in electricity and attacked his Blastoise with a thunderbolt. The bolt of yellow electricity tore through the ground and struck Blastoise with blinding speeds. It sent Blastoise flying through the air and towards the ground, knocking it unconscious with a single attack. Tyranitar seemed to sneer before turning its attention back to Garchomp. Everyone was in shock as Gary ran towards his starter Pokemon. Be Blastoise! Misty and Brock ran after Gary to help, both worried about their own Pokemon. Ash gritted his teeth in frustration, knowing full well how powerful Gary's Blastoise must be. Oh, one punch KO. He was angry and knew he had to do something too. Snorlax, full power Mega Punch on Tyranitar. Ash, no! Minato shouted. Max agreed. Ash, Tyranitar is too strong! The ground shook as Snorlax sped toward Tyranitar, angry that it had interrupted its peaceful sleeping and eating time. His fist glowed with energy and he shouted in defiance. LAX! As if to spite its opponent, Tyranitar charged up its own Mega Punch with its left fist, its weaker fist, and only backhanded Snorlax's attack. The sleeping Pokemon immediately stopped and was forced to retreat completely. Its attack didn't even hurt Tyranitar. Ash watched wide-eyed as his more physically powerful Pokemon was swatted away like a fly and sent flying back into a tree, uprooting it as a result. Snorlax! Ash shouted helplessly. May was trembling. Snorlax and Blastoise defeated with a single attack. Minato stood up and growled. We have to leave this place. It's too dangerous to stay here now. Mito took her mother's hand and was almost crying. Mom, why are Nara and Ai's Pokemon doing this? Don't worry, honey, Kushina said as she hugged her baby. They're just frustrated and will be back to normal in a while. The group was slowly migrating away from the battle, but with each clash between Tyranitar and Garchomp, tremors and shockwaves were sent outward, knocking everyone back each time. And no matter which direction the group moved, it seemed like the battle would follow them. The range and area of the battle were too wide, and with Garchomp's speed, there was simply no way to escape. Mito and all the other younger trainers were huddled with their parents, wondering if the older trainers could do anything. But seeing how Gary and Ash's physically stronger Pokémon were being knocked back like it was nothing, they didn't hold out much hope. Professor Oak was watching the battle closely and was trying to think of a solution. Garchomp's temper has always been bad, and so has Tyranitar's, but for them to fight this seriously, something must have happened. There had always been petty jostling and pranks, but none had been this devastating. Garchomp had never been so agitated as to use Draco Meteor, nor had Tyranitar ever used its full-power Hyper Beam. If that beam had hit the ground, the collateral damage would have been horrific. But no matter, we need to get out of their vicinity, Minato nodded. I'm already on it. The blonde scientist was playing with his Pokenav and somehow managed to teleport a Poke Ball into his hand. This is my newest invention, a portable teleportation device that can be installed in your Pokenav. Max, despite the situation, seemed giddy about the invention. But I'll explain more later. He threw the Pokeball to the ground. Alakazam, Zakam, teleport the people away! Alakazam could only teleport a maximum of 2 people at a time, and Minato gestured to Mito and Kushina first. Take Mito and Kushina to the house. But before Alakazam could walk to his master's family, the ground shook again. Hurry! Minato shouted as he fell to the ground. The shaking wasn't just tremors. It was one of Tyranitar's earthquake attacks, and it was at full power. Minato, come here! Kushina yelled as she pulled her husband closer, holding Mito with her other arm. Alakazam, date hurry! Professor Oak fell and felt chills when he saw what the 2 powerful Pokémon were preparing. We have to run, now! They're both charging up a Giga Impact. True to the professor's word, Tyranitar and Garchomp glowed, a wild torrent of energy warping around their bodies. Garchomp swooped down to the ground and, with a burst of speed, charged forward with another sonic boom, attacking at the speed of sound. Tyranitar, on the other hand, charged as fast as it could, and while it wasn't as fast as Garchomp, it used its massive mass to increase its momentum. In a split second, the dragon hit the ground, but for some reason, there was no impact explosion. Wow, that was close! The entire group had their heads down, bracing for impact, but slowly began to look up at the lack of an explosion and the new voice. Is everyone okay? The voice sounded worried and concerned, but also relieved. I'm so sorry about those 2. Minato and Kushina looked at the owner of the voice with wide eyes. And Naruto? 2 separate, but equally loud, booms sounded from the distance, one from the west and one from the east. The newcomer, with spiky blonde hair that closely resembled Minato's, but had shorter bangs. He also closely resembled Minato, but had Kushina's rounder face and eye shape. Wearing a pair of gray jeans held together by a white belt, a pair of clean black sandals, and a simple black sleeveless shirt with an orange swirled design, Naruto, the previous champion of Kanto and Johto, and the most famous prodigy in the Pokemon world, smiled lovingly at his family. Naru and I! Mito shouted as she jumped from the ground into her older brother's arms. The young Namikaze laughed and lifted his little sister into his arms, hugging her tightly. Oh, I've missed you so much, Mito. He kissed Mito's forehead as he placed her on the ground. And you've grown so much! You're almost reaching my shoulder! Mito had tears in her eyes as she clung to her brother's shirt. I miss you too, Nara and I. Naruto Namikaze! Kushina yelled as loud as she could before slamming her fist into her son's head. Where have you been for the past 2 years? You say you like to travel, but you won't call your parents or return their calls. What kind of son are you? Minato also looked stern as he stood up to face his son. Your mother is right, Naruto. We were worried and you should have at least answered our calls. Naruto simply patted her head with a shy smile. I'm sorry, Mom, Dad, but you know how bad I am with this stuff. He smiled and hugged his mother and took his father's arm. I lose my Pokenav every day, and sometimes I just forget things when I'm concentrating. Kushina wrapped her arms around her baby and Minato patted her on the shoulder, both of them excited. But I remembered to come back today. He smiled at Mito, who was still holding the back of his shirt. I would never miss Mito's 10th birthday and seeing her get her first Pokemon. You're not leaving for at least a month, you hear me? Kushina ordered, crying. Minato nodded. Yeah, you're staying home. Naruto chuckled and shrugged. Sure, happy to. He hugged his mother tighter and smiled at his father. I've missed you all, Naruto. Professor Oak murmured with a soft smile. It's good to have you back. It's good to be back, old man. The champion chuckled at the destruction around the area. I feel sorry for Sora and Tsuchi. I didn't know they would cause so much trouble and danger for everyone. Naruto finally spotted Ash and Gary. And wow! Mito isn't the only one who's grown up. Ash and Gary are young men now. Ash smiled at his childhood hero. It's good to see you, Naruto. Yeah, it's about time you came back. Gary murmured with a smile and his arms crossed. Where did Garchomp and Tyranitar go? Misty wondered aloud. Naruto smiled at the girl and snapped his fingers. I sent them away. They both just crashed into the ground there. There was a flash and Garchomp and Tyranitar were back, both mangled in dirt and clearly still angry. They were snarling at each other and were still in fighting stances, but Espeon and Umbreon were standing next to them with their paws on them, just in case. Yami and Hikari are very fast and accurate, Naruto said, pointing to Umbreon and Espeon respectively. They both followed Sora and Tsuchi and barely teleported them away. Naruto stroked his Umbreon's head proudly. Sora is my fastest Pokemon and Yami almost didn't make it in time. Luckily Yami was smart enough to teleport close to Tsuchi to catch up. Max looked at the Umbreon in amazement. Wow, such skill in teleportation. Tyranitar and Garchomp started growling louder. Both of you, stop him right now! Immediately, the two titans were silenced and moved away from each other. Come here! They both bowed their heads, looking almost apologetic as Naruto looked at them. I'm very disappointed in you two. I don't care who did what. You put everyone in danger and that's not how I trained you. Garchomp and Tyranitar bowed their heads even further, like they would when it was just Gible and Larvitar. Now go back to the field and stay there. Either of you will be getting dinner tonight. Reluctantly, they both sank back into the fields, not raising their heads. And if I find either of you causing any more trouble, I will let Amaterasu teach you a lesson. For some reason unknown to the others, Max looked at Naruto with stars in his eyes while Misty, Brock, and Mei were surprised by how Naruto could tame such powerful Pokemon so easily. It was like they were a grow-eyed puppy. But everyone was also surprised that Naruto was so carefree and casual. They had all expected him to be much more serious and intimidating. His reputation around Kanto certainly made him a terrifying and ruthless character. Naruto turned and smiled as Mito ran to take his hand. Well, what did I miss? Professor Oak chuckled almost uncomfortably. I guess we should go back to giving out starter Pokemon. Kushina and Minato smiled and looked at each other. Our son is home. Chapter 2. Here we are, all of us. After a brief hour of cleaning, Professor Oak's lab was properly presented to the group of trainers and their families. All the files and Pokeballs were back on their proper shelves, but most of the computers were broken and smashed, leaving the normally high-tech desks without screens. Fortunately, the overall infrastructure of the building was intact, and none of the walls were cracked, though some parts of the ceiling were missing tiles and part of the pendant light had fallen to the floor. Ultimately, all of the starter Pokemon were perfectly intact in their Pokeballs and could be handed out. Naruto scratched the back of his neck. I'm so sorry about all the trouble, old man. The professor laughed and waved his hand. It's fine, Naruto. None of the important stuff is damaged. He draped his lab coat over the back of his desk chair and smiled at the crowd as they surrounded the pile of Pokeballs. And I've always wanted to show these kids some proper Pokemon before they get their own, and this year it actually happened. Tyranitar and Garchomp are definitely very powerful and well-trained, well, when their trainer is around, but regardless, they're extremely high-leveled. Professor Birch smiled and nodded. I'll say, normal hyper beams, even from a Tyranitar, wouldn't have such destructive power. The younger professor recalled seeing the clouds blown away by the strong attack and remained astonished. I'd go on a whim and say Tyranitar is almost at the peak of its potential. It's as strong as a Tyranitar could be. Max smiled and nodded. Totally. Garchomp's Draco Meteor was gigantic, and Tyranitar's Hyper Beam was strong enough to reach beyond the clouds. That's way beyond what normal attacks like that can do, Mei smiled. After all, they are trained by the champion of Kanto and Johto. Can we get our Pokemon now? Mito asked loudly as she jumped up and down. Yes, we'll start right now. Professor Oak smiled at the girl and nodded as he pointed to the Pokeballs. Here are the choices again, kids. Professor Oak recited as he looked at the group of excited new trainers. Here are 3 basic starter types. Bulbasaur, a grass-type Pokemon, Squirtle, a water-type Pokemon, and Charmander, a fire-type Pokemon. Each of these Pokemon is easier to train than most and has already been taught to listen to its trainers, and each of them has very powerful evolved forms. Mito was staring at the Pokeball placed in front of a picture of a Charmander. She'd already made up her mind years ago when she learned that her brother started out with a Charmander. She'd seen Naruto battle with his Charizard and how amazing it was. Mito wanted something like that, not just a powerful partner, but also a close friend. Not to mention, she'd seen her brother ride on the back of his Charizard and soar through the skies. That made her want a Charmander more than anything. Mito would like nothing more than to feel the clouds rush through her hair as the world unceremoniously passed by beneath them. And of course, the baby Charmander she met a few weeks ago in the lab was the cutest Pokemon she'd ever seen. Some of you have already told me your choices weeks in advance, so I've reserved your requests for each of you. Professor Oak smiled at the Namake's family daughters and gestured. Mito, come here. Kushina and Minato smiled proudly as their baby ran up to the professor, giggling nervously as she clasped her hands together. Do I have my Charmander now? She asked loudly, making the others laugh. Oak smiled and nodded. Yes, you do. He placed Charmander's Pokeball in Mito's hands and ruffled her hair. I'm happy to give you your first Pokemon, Mito. Make sure you take care of it with love and care. I'm going. Mito tossed the Pokeball into the air, letting out a white light. A very young Charmander fell out of the air, and Mito picked it up, laughing as she hugged it. My Charmander, Char! The Pokemon purred as it snuggled into its master's chest. Professor Oak smiled fondly at the sight. This Charmander is a female, and she's one of the best-behaved Pokemon in the lab. Ash, along with his friends, was further back in the room, but they all had smiles on their faces. Most of the group reminisced about the times they each received their first Pokemon. Whether from Pallet Town, Cerulean City, Pewter City, or Little Root Town, they were all fond memories their owners would never forget. Like many other firsts in life, starter Pokemon will always be a big part of a person's life. Max, looking on with envy, could only wish her own 10th birthday would come sooner. Hey kiddo! Mito whispered as she slowly walked over to her family. I'm going to name you Benheim after you, Mom! Thanks, love. Minato stood behind Kushina and wrapped his arms around her as she rested against him. Even without seeing his wife's beautiful face, he knew there were tears in her eyes. They were both extremely proud of their baby girl, who looked so happy and giddy holding her little Pokemon in her arms. After hearing Mito talk about how she would care for and love her little Charmander, seeing her hold one was heartwarming. Unfortunately, this also meant that the beginning of Mito's Pokemon journey was about to begin, and Minato and Kushina weren't sure if they would be happy having her so far from home. Naruto stood next to his parents and smiled at his little sister. The scene reminded him of his own starter Pokemon. Congratulations, Mito! Kushina hugged Mito and kissed the top of her head, nearly crushing the little Charmander between them. I'm so proud of you, Mito! Minato joined the hug and kissed his daughter's head as Kushina sobbed. You're going to be a great trainer. Mito smiled at her parents before turning to her brother. Naru and I, can I see your Charizard? Naruto understood his sister's reasons and patted her head. Sure, I'm sure the others will too. As someone who grew up in Pallet Town, Naruto knew exactly how well prepared and sufficient the fields designed by Professor Oak for Pokemon were. In his younger days, Naruto had worked on the professor's fields and taken care of many Pokemon, studying their behavior and habitat. In fact, the young Namakes had designed several fields of his own, including the field his own Pokemon were currently using. From the size to the soil type, the height and type of trees, the amount of wild fruit around the area, the pH levels of the water, and even the amount of noise that would carry over, he planned his Pokemon teams before catching them and prepared his fields accordingly. I've never actually been here before, Ash muttered as he looked at the thick forest. Most of the young trainers and their parents left. The last thing they wanted was to get close to the two Pokemon that almost killed them. Mito, holding Naruto's hand, skipped along as they headed toward the field. Kushina and Minato were right behind them, smiling at the closeness of their babies. It had been a long time since Mito had seen Naruto, and as a little sister looking up to her brother as a hero, they weren't surprised that she clung to him so tightly. Ash and Max constantly looked around, trying to see any of Naruto's Pokemon, but none appeared. "Where are your Pokemon, Naru and I?" Mito asked while holding her little Beneheim under one arm. "Right there, in that clearing." Naruto led the way through the thick forest, and soon a large clearing. At first it was narrow, but it expanded to twice the size of the other fields. All the grass was neatly trimmed, and there were large patches of flowers that delighted the entire field. The scents of daffodils and lilies wafted through the air, and a gentle breeze carried them throughout the field. It was nothing like the other fields. This was a controlled environment. It was more like a natural forest clearing. "Where are they?" Max asked. Kushina and Minato smiled at him and held hands. Naruto patted Mito's head before taking a step forward, smiling as he walked into the clearing. "Everyone wait here for now. I have to go in first." Mito tilted her head as she hugged Beneheim close to her chest. "Where?" Before Naruto, or anyone else, could respond, Mito was shocked to see her brother disappear before her eyes. "Where did he go?" Misty and May asked strangely in sync. Ash and Gary, along with Brock and Tracy, stepped forward and felt the air, and were surprised to sense some kind of invisible barrier. It was as if most of the clearing was sealed off by an invisible wall. It's a barrier," Tracy muttered. "It must be generated by some psychic Pokemon. But to conjure such a large, invisible barrier, it must be powerful. And the barrier actually visually blocks the scenery inside, so it must be accompanied by some kind of hypnosis attack." Tracy looked at the professor. "That's why we always leave food outside the forest. No one is allowed to even enter the clearing." Professor Oak smiled and nodded with his arms crossed. "Yes, it is quite fascinating. I almost never see such a diverse group of Pokemon form their own little society. Maybe it's because of the way Naruto trained his Pokemon, but they have their own hierarchy and a whole chain of command." "Wow, that's amazing," May whispered in wonder. Mita looked at her parents. "So Naru and I is inside with his Pokemon now?" Minato nodded as he stroked his daughter's head. "Yes, he was teleported inside." The Namikaze patriarch had been one of the first two to hear his son's theory about a grand new barrier dome, and he'd been fascinated by it ever since. To think that a Pokemon could, over the long term, maintain such a demanding technique, his son's Pokemon were truly astonishing. "Your brother's Pokemon don't like to associate much with other trainers' Pokemon and like their privacy, so they live inside this dome." Minato also knew that his son had always kept his training techniques a closely guarded secret, and the dome was a good way to keep people from spying on him. "So, can we go in?" asked the young Namikaze. Kushina nodded. "Yeah, I think your brother will let us in soon, Suki," Naruto whispered as a sad smile appeared on his face. "Come here." A beautiful Gardevoir had tears in her eyes as she teleported in front of her trainer and jumped into his arms. As one of Naruto's first Pokemon in the Hoenn region, Suki had always been one of Naruto's favorites, and he had really missed her. Watching her grow from a shy little Ralts to a beautiful Kirlia, then to a gorgeous Gardevoir made Naruto almost feel like a father. She was definitely one of his Pokemon princesses and definitely had the power to be one of the leaders of his team. G-Guard! The Pokemon sobbed as she snuggled into her trainer's shoulder. Naruto wrapped his arms around his princess and kissed the top of her head. "I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get back, but I've missed you all." He petted Gardevoir's head and looked around at the beautiful clearing. "And you've clearly kept up with our training. The illusion barrier looks great and works even better than before." Gardevoir still had tears in her eyes and Naruto wiped them away. "Don't worry, I won't be leaving anymore. I'll stay with all of you, and if I travel again, I'll bring all of you with me." Suki nodded. Gardevoir, now let's get the others out of here." Naruto, with Suki still clinging to his arm, walked forward and smiled. "Come on, everyone, get out of here!" It happened in a split second, the brilliant flash of white light that engulfed the area. But there was no surprise on Naruto's part. He knew exactly what was going on. He'd spent weeks training all his Pokemon for such a dramatic entrance many years ago, and had always loved it. He wouldn't have admitted it back then, but one of the main reasons he placed a psychic type within most of his teams was for such entrances. Perhaps it was his father's influence, but he thought teleport was one of the most practical and flashy moves to use, and the entrances couldn't be better with it. He smiled as his 6 teams appeared before him in splendor. Standing at the forefront was his first team. A magnificent Gyarados, along with 2 glorious Pidgeot, a grinning Jengar, and a stoic Alakazam stood proud despite their lack of leadership. All the other teams fanned out to the sides. Naruto's second team, a Dragonite, a Dragonair, an incredibly red Gyarados, a Meganium, a Scizor, and a Sneasel. Then, his third, Tsuchi, his recently angered Tyranitar, stood in front of his subordinates, a Blastoise, 2 Arcanine, an Aerodactyl, and a Steelix. Then there was his Hoenn team, the leader, a Salamence, along with a Blaziken, a Flygon, a Metagross, and an Absol. Gardevoir also belonged to this team, but was still holding on to Naruto's arm. His next team was led by Sora, the Garchomp, and despite his minor injuries, he stood proudly in front of his troops. An Infernape, 2 Metacam, a beautiful Milotic, and a Luxray looked proud. And finally, the 6th team was led by a Gudra, a Haxorus, Hydreigon, 2 Greninja, and Golade followed. "Ah, come here!" It may have been a mistake to teach him some of his Pokemon teleport or agility, because they all slammed into him and knocked him to the ground. Itachi, his Sneasel, was the first and attached itself to his head, just like it would when they were traveling through Johto. Next was Meganium. Her name was Midori, and she knocked him to the ground, but that didn't stop her from licking his face. Benny and Shiro were next, his twin Arcanine, and they, along with Midori, drenched his face. Then Naruto felt something slide beneath him, and he was giddy as he watched his Aoiheim, his Dragonair, wrap herself around him with a cute smile. He was laughing when all his friends, his girlfriends, his princesses smothered him with affection. It had been a long time, and he really missed them all. "Sticky stuff!" Naruto laughed even harder as Gudra, with her usual big grin, pounced on the group, covering them all in sticky goo. "Goo, Gudra!" Naruto hugged his happy dragon closer. "I miss you too, Saiken!" Explosion, Blastoise! Mizukage muttered as he sprayed the group with a stream of water, cleaning off the sticky substance. Kazakiri and Kazakiba, his twin Pidgeot, made a vortex of wind around the group and dried everyone out. "Oh, I missed you all so much!" Absol, called Shiki, nuzzled his leg, causing Naruto to smile, scratch his neck, and pat his head. "I'm sorry it took me so long to get back, but that's the last time I'm going away for so long." The blonde rested on the smooth scales of his Milotic and smiled at each of his Pokemon. "From now on, I'll be spending a lot more time with all of you." He looked at Suki with a soft smile. "Now let go of the barrier, Suki." In an instant, his family, along with the others, were standing behind him, expressions of shock and awe on their faces. All of Naruto's Pokemon were standing in formation the moment the barrier fell, each leader standing proudly in front of their subordinates. It was as if they had been trained to appear as formidable and intimidating as possible in front of other people, even if they were their master's family and friends. Wow! May muttered as she looked at the sight in awe. It was almost overwhelming to think that every Pokemon in front of her was probably as strong as the Tyranitar and Garchomp showdown. Ash and Gary were thinking along the same lines, but they were also comparing their own Pokemon to Naruto's. They had some of the same Pokemon, but they could clearly tell that Naruto's were at much higher levels. It wasn't just because of their physical condition or size, but also because of their powerful dispositions. It was as if they all had some kind of hidden power that revealed to everyone that they weren't normal Pokemon. They were the pinnacle of Pokemon development. "Look at them all!" Max shouted dizzily as he jumped forward a little. Professor Oak smiled and crossed his arms. "I've always loved how everyone falls into formation whenever they meet someone new." "Yes, it's fascinating," Professor Birch agreed. "And it's good to see you have a lot of Hoenn Pokemon as well." He clearly noticed that Gardevoir was responsible for Barrier Dome, which was already impressive, but the others looked incredible as well. The Blaziken, Flygon, and Metagross all look very healthy, and it was always nice to see a trainer with an Absol. "Wow!" he murmured as he noticed the other Pokemon. "You also have Pokemon from Sinnoh, Unova, and Kalos." Naruto smiled and patted Saiken on the head. "Yes, I've traveled before challenging the Elite Four, and I've had these teams since I was 15. Mito tugged on her brother's hand. "Naru and I, what about your Charizard?" The former champion smiled at his little sister and nodded. "She's here." He reached for one of the poke balls attached to his belt, but unlike the rest, it wasn't red and white. It was completely black with a white center. And when his other Pokemon noticed him reach for it, They all seemed to stand taller and more serious. "Come out, Amaterasu!" The usual white light came out of the pokeball and a tall figure emerged from it. "Char!" Its low growl sounded like a roar and made Max and May step back in shock, and soon a magnificent Charizard stood proudly in front of everyone. Instantly, everyone knew this was no normal Charizard. It was much larger and taller. It was also a darker shade of orange, and its flame was much more intense and larger. It was so hot that the group felt a little uncomfortable standing around it. The professors were also surprised to see Tyranitar and Garchomp tilt their heads and avoid Naruto's first Pokemon's gaze, as if afraid of being in trouble. However, everyone's attention was mainly focused on the eye patch Amaterasu wore over her left eye and a long scar that stretched from the corner of her eye to her left cheek. Beneheim squirmed a little in Mito's arms and moaned as she looked at Amaterasu. "Char, relax, guys." Naruto reached out and patted his older friend on the neck. "She's very friendly and would never hurt you." Amaterasu looked down at Beneheim and crouched down with her claws, only to lightly pat her head. Naruto smirked and Mito giggled. "See, she's strong, but friendly." Kushina and Minato smiled and walked over to their children. "That's very sweet." Mito looked at Amaterasu with a smile. "So that's what a Charizard looks like." It had been a long time since Mito had seen her brother's starter Pokemon in person. She saw it on TV when her brother's battle with the Elite Four aired, but the last time she saw Amaterasu in person, it was probably still a Charmeleon. "Well, it looks a lot bigger than Ash's Charizard," Misty muttered as Brock nodded. Naruto smiled. "Yes, Amaterasu kept growing after she evolved, and as she got stronger, she also got bigger. So, are these all your Pokemon, Nera and I?" "Not at all," the blonde replied with a smile. "These are my main teams and each one is based on an individual region. I trained these teams specifically to battle Pokemon gyms and the Elite Four." Naruto took Mito's hand and led her further into the clearing. "The rest are here." The others followed behind along with the 6 teams and entered an even larger clearing, and the group was once again surprised at the sight. There were no overwhelming teams or Pokemon, but it also didn't look anything like a Pokemon lab field. "Hey guys!" Naruto shouted loudly. At his call, hundreds of Pokemon of all ranks and sizes rushed towards Naruto, all giddy and happy to see their master. But these weren't the incredibly trained titans like the ones in the teams. They were almost like wild Pokemon. Almost immediately, the Piku twin latched onto Naruto's head and stroked his hair. Dozens of Nidoran male and female Rattata, Pidgey, Growlithe, Vulpix surrounded Naruto and all tried to jump towards him. Coming a little slower were surprisingly several Dratini, and one of them was pink. Mito couldn't even stop herself and ran to pick it up, joking when the little dragon whined when it couldn't reach Naruto. "Holy crap!" Max shouted as loud as he could. "There must be hundreds." May and Misty were laughing as the hordes of Butterfree and Beautifly surrounded them. "Wow, I love this place!" The girls, along with Max and Brock, entered the Pokemon group and basked in their affection. "You're all so kind and cute!" Brock was amazed by the amount. "I wonder how many Pokemon are here. Just under 600 to be exact." Professor Oak checked on every single Pokemon every day and knew the numbers better than anyone. Ash and Gary looked further down the clearing and saw more Pokemon coming, and there were some very rare Pokemon among the crowd. They're not just normal wild Pokemon found in normal areas. Some of the Pokemon here are very rare, like the Dratini, especially the pink Dratini. Kushina walked over to Mito and gave her son a look. "I can't believe you were hiding this little cutie from me." The pink Dratini purred as Mito and Kushina petted her head and began to climb up Mito's arm. "She's so precious and cute." The Dratini stroked Mito's long hair and seemed strangely comfortable nestling in her head. "Oh, and she likes you, sweetheart." Naruto smiled and nodded. "Yeah, he likes you, Mito." The girl laughed and patted the Dratini as Beneheim leaned closer to look at it. "I really like her too, so how about you keep her?" Mito was surprised and looked at his brother. "Really?" Misty, May, and Max looked envious as Naruto nodded. "Yeah. I'm not training her right now, and I already have a Dragonite and a Dragonair on my teams." He petted Dratini's head and smiled. "She seems to like you a lot, and I'm sure you can use another Pokemon to train with. Having 2 Pokemon training together is always better for a trainer." He smiled at his sister. "So what do you think? Do you want to keep her?" Mito smiled and nodded. "Of course I want it. Thank you, Nera and I." No problem. Naruto ruffled Mito's hair before taking a step closer to the field, looking at the wide, open space. But before I forget, I have to show this place to my new Pokemon. Minato smiled. What kind of Pokemon did you catch? Naruto laughed at his father before throwing 4 poke balls onto the ground, letting out 4 beams of light. Well, these aren't like my older Pokemon. A Glacian appeared first and quickly smiled at Naruto, but it wasn't as fast as the Jolteon that jumped into his arms. A Miltank was the next to appear, and next to it was a Vanillite, both of which looked delighted to be freed. I don't use them for battling at all. Well, I haven't battling in a long time anyway. She's really cute. Kushina cooed as she held the Glacian, making her purr as she scratched behind her ears. Naruto knelt down and patted Miltank on the head. They're very well behaved and make the best ice cream in the Unova region. Minato and Kushina looked confused, but Naruto continued. That's what I've been doing. I opened my own little ice cream shop in Verbank City and business is booming. Mito looked at his brother. Do you sell ice cream? Yeah. It's pretty fun and relaxing. Minato smiled at his boyfriend and placed a hand on his shoulder. Well, that's one way to enjoy life. It's better than what your grandfather does, at least. Naruto chuckled. Definitely. He smiled at the group. Hey, feel free to play with the Pokemon, but I need to talk to Professor Oak for a second. His parents gave him an almost sad look, but ultimately decided to let things be. Is that okay, old man? Mito looked at her brother in confusion, but remained silent, knowing her brother had his own schedule. Professor Oak sighed at his nickname and nodded. Sure, come with me. The professor knew exactly what Naruto wanted when he asked for his attention, and quickly led him back to the lab. It had been quite some time since Naruto had reviewed his old project, but the old man wasn't surprised. It had been so many years, he doubted it would ever yield anything. Nonetheless, it had been Naruto's most focused project since he was a child and he was deeply connected to it, so the professor understood. So, an ice cream shop, Naruto? Naruto smiled and nodded to his mentor. Yeah, I'll make you a cone later. Oak laughed and nodded. I look forward to it. The Pokemon researcher looked down at the boy he had watched grow up before his eyes and smiled sadly. But if I may ask, aren't you still fighting? Silently, Naruto shook his head, looking quite stoic. Professor Oak sighed and placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. It's been 4 years now, boy. What happened that day was a tragedy, but it wasn't your fault. There was no way you could have predicted such a consequence. Amaterasu lost an eye that day, and her Pokemon died. Naruto brushed his hair back and sighed. No Pokemon battle should cost any Pokemon their life. You have to learn to let go. You're far too young to be carrying so much baggage. Just like 4 years ago, Professor Oak noticed that Naruto was missing the fire he'd had in his eyes since birth. You are truly the most talented trainer I've ever seen, and it's a shame you no longer train for battle. Your 6 teams are still in top form and all yearn to battle. The professor looked ahead and took his key card. You have a gift, Naruto. No amount of luck or good fortune could allow a 12-year-old boy to defeat every gym leader in 2 regions without losing once, and it should be impossible for the same boy to defeat the Elite 4 consecutively with such ease. Don't waste it. This gift turned me into a killer, so I hope I don't use it. He'd gotten used to it after 4 years of no Pokemon battles. Everything fell silent as Professor Oak opened one of the many steel doors in the lab and they both entered, both staring at the single Pokemon egg that lay still under a warm light. It was the only specimen inside the large room, and there were many computers connected to it. It displayed a steady heartbeat on the monitors, and Naruto smiled softly as he placed a hand on top of the egg, tracing his fingers along the swirling patterns on the white shell. It's been a long time, Naruto whispered to the egg. Since you're going to be staying for a while, I think you should talk to the egg more. Naruto nodded and picked up the egg. I definitely will. Suddenly, a vision flashed before his eyes, and he saw the shadow of a Pokemon. Lugia, the image and voice disappeared like a whisper in the wind, and he simply shook his head. Come on, old man, I'll make you an ice cream cone. Chapter 3. Home sweet home, indeed. Naruto murmured softly to himself with a smile. As a champion, Naruto had been to many places around the world and lived in the most luxurious villas with the kindest hosts, but none had made him feel as peaceful and cozy as his small family home. Perhaps he inherited it from his parents, who were extremely wealthy, especially with his father as the inventor of one of the most widely used technologies in the world, but he preferred a small, warm home. No hallway of endless marble floors or grand chandeliers could match the wooden floor his father made himself and the walls decorated with his mother's favorite paintings. Every trip up the stairs or through the living room was like reliving his wonderful childhood, looking at photographs his parents had carefully chosen and framed to preserve his precious moments. A sudden vibration from his pokenav broke Naruto from his thoughts. I was wondering when she would ext me. Naru and I? Naruto closed his pokenav and looked at his little sister, who was looking at him confused. Why are you standing in the kitchen? The blonde chuckled and ruffled Mito's hair. I'm going to make you some ice cream. Really? The girl squealed with a smile. Awesome! Naruto released Glacian and Miltank from their poke balls and smiled as they nuzzled against him. Can you take them outside to the courtyard, Mito? I'll see you outside in a minute. Mito laughed and took Glacian in her arms and patted Miltank on the head. Sure! Follow me, guys! As soon as his sister was out of sight, Naruto opened his pokenav again and smiled at the message. After living together for so long, it was a little strange making ice cream without her taking hours to decide which flavor she wanted. He already missed her, a lot. He wanted to see her cute, thoughtful expression when she was trying to decide on chocolate or vanilla, waffle cone or sundae, and watch her lick the cold treat with a happy smile. Oh, well, I'll see her in a month or so. This is so good! Mito squealed as she licked the heavenly ice cream. It's perfectly made, Naru and I. After a pleasant afternoon playing with Pokemon, everyone enjoyed the nice weather and had a very nice dinner on the porch of Namake's home. The sun was beginning to set, and everyone decided to try some of Naruto's ice cream. Naruto chuckled and patted his Glacian and Miltank proudly. All credit goes to Yuki and Chi-Chi. The former champion had spent weeks learning from a local dessert chef and spent even more time trying to teach his Pokemon how to make ice cream, and he finally succeeded if his booming business was any indication. His shop, Sweet Ice, had become a local success story of Burbank City, and many tourists stopped by whenever they visited the city. And if Naruto had to thank any human being, it would be the casting directors who decided to film Pokemon Princess Holiday and make their shop one of the big parts of the movie. They've gotten really good at making ice cream and managed to master 5 new flavors last month. May was giddy as she ate her own cone. Vanilla is just amazing. I prefer strawberry, but I have to say the cone is also wonderfully made. Brock smiled at Naruto and gave him an appraising nod. Your pastry skills must be top-notch to make such crispy, layered cones. Thanks, Brock. Naruto replied with an embarrassed smile. I practiced a lot. Kushina smiled at her son as he finished his own coconut-flavored cone, but she couldn't help but feel a little sad. Naruto looked perfectly happy and content on the outside, but the fact that he decided to open an ice cream shop only confirmed the loving mother's concern. His refusal to fight other trainers was just one of Naruto's ways of avoiding the memories of that day. Most of his way of dealing with his trauma was buried deep inside. Kushina feared that without help, Naruto would have a very hard time. Her son making ice cream was just a way for him to distract himself. Of that much Kushina was fairly certain. Minato seemed to know what his wife was thinking and placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't worry. I think this is a very healthy way to deal with things. The father knew that Naruto was a lot like him and Kushina in the way he wanted to have a simple life. That might not have been the case when he was a teenager, but after so many years of fame, fortune, and travel, Minato was sure that Naruto just wanted to live a normal life. And he's always been a smart, strong boy. We don't have to worry about him. Kushina kissed her husband's cheek. I hope so. Here, girls, Mito whispered as she gave Dratini and Charmander some ice cream. Try some. So, when are you going to start your journey, Mito? Ash asked with a satisfied smile, his Rocky Road ice cream happily digesting. And are you going to travel through the Kanto region first? I'm going to start as soon as I can, and yes, I'm going to travel around Kanto. Mita looked happy, but her parents just looked worried. I can't wait to see all the different places. I've read about all the Pokemon festivals and gyms in all the different cities, and I think I want to go to Cerulean City more and enjoy one of the water shows. Misty smiled. Well, I'll be waiting for you there. I can't wait. Mito replied. You know. May began. You can travel with us, Mito. The Namake's girl looked intrigued. Anyway, We're going around the Kanto region. Ash is crossing the battle frontier, and I'm going to watch the contests. The brunette smiled. Traveling is much more fun with a group of friends. I'd love to, Mito squealed. It gives me a chance to beat Ash, Ash smiled. We'll see about that. Naruto finished cleaning up his ice cream gear and sat down next to his sister around the patio table. If you're going to be traveling through Kanto, remember to get a good fishing rod and catch some good Magikarp. Gyarados makes a perfect partner for both Charizard and Dragonite, and if you ever want to try your hand at double or triple battles, they'll be the way to go. Mito nodded as many others listened. It's not every day a champion gives advice. Start training it as a Magikarp and it'll be easier to control once it evolves, and you can have it battle Dratini or Charmander to develop them all a little faster. Mito jotted down a few mental notes as Minato turned to his son. So, where are you going, Naruto? Kushina gave her husband a look. After being here for a while, Naruto shrugged. I hired some people and their Pokemon to take care of my shop in Verbank, so I'm pretty free. Kushina gave her son a stern look. You'll be staying at home with us for a while. And if you're going to travel, you'll be traveling with us. Naruto laughed shyly and nodded to his mother. It's been a long time since you've been on a trip with me and your father, and you're coming with us next month. Where are you going? Delia asked. Kushina gave a small smile. The National Pokemon Association contacted me a few weeks ago. Everyone turned to listen to the Master Coordinator. They'll be hosting the next Grand Festival on the Indigo Plateau in the Kanto region, and it just so happens to be the 100th anniversary of the Grand Festival. May already looked delighted at the thought. They want to spice up the show since it'll be broadcast live in every region, so they asked if I wanted to be the special guest and give a performance that night. And you're going to do it? May yelled loudly. Can we see you act? Kushina laughed and nodded. Yeah. It's been a long time, but I still have a few tricks up my sleeve. May grabbed Ash by the neck. We have Tio go there. Ash tried to calm his friend and nodded. Sure, I want to go too. We have a month before that happens, so let's try to get everything done before then. I'm sure we can do it. Minato took his wife's hand, but he couldn't help but growl. After more than 2 decades of marriage, his wife was still as beautiful as ever, and while he loved it, it would also mean her former suitors would try to woo her again. He couldn't begin to express his annoyance all those years ago. Those godforsaken male Pokemon coordinators would always think of themselves as God's gift to women and flirt with them even though their boyfriend was right next to them. Especially that Wallace individual. Minato had nearly punched a man in the face for trying to hug Kushina. Yes, you're coming with us, Naruto. As far as Minato was concerned, his son was a far better trainer than he'd ever been, and if Wallace tried anything again, he'd send his son to look after him. That flamboyant artist wouldn't stand a chance against his son. And bring your strongest team with you, Naruto scratched his head. Sure, Dad. Kushina laughed and kissed Minato's cheek. You're cute. All right, then we need to speed up our way through the battle frontier. Ash muttered as he turned to May, Brock, Max, and Mito. That really should be possible, and even if we don't finish in time, we can always head to Indigo Plateau when the time comes and continue after the festival, May giggled. And if I'm lucky, I can get 5 Kanto ribbons in time to participate in the Grand Festival. Hey, I want to try my luck at some gyms too. Mito had heard all the stories of her brother beating gym after gym without losing, and she wanted to see if she could do it too. I need some time to train, but I think we can stop at a gym next month. The smile on Mito's face only made Max blush and turn away. Brock smiled. I'm sure we can work out a schedule that fits all of these things. Ash smiled back. Traveling with friends is always fun. That brought a thought to Mito's mind, and she looked at her brother. Hey, Neru and I, have you ever traveled with anyone? She'd heard almost all of her brother's stories from their parents, but neither had actually mentioned anything about any traveling companions. It would be very interesting to know if he had any help on his journey. Did you meet anyone on your trip? Naruto smiled at the thought and nodded. Yeah, I did. The younger trainers turned their attention back to Naruto. I only had one traveling companion, and we traveled together for 6 years. That long? Mito yelled. How come I've never met him? Not him, Mito. Minato smiled and stroked his daughter's head. She was a girl. Yes, but I didn't know you two traveled together for so long. Kushina muttered, slightly surprised. I knew you two traveled around Kanto and Johto, and I thought it ended there. Her son had always been a bit of a fool when it came to calling his parents and telling them his location, but Kushina was surprised to learn that her son's traveling companion had accompanied him for so long. I thought he returned to Sinnoh and competed in the Sinnoh League at the same time you were in the Indigo League. She went back to Sinnoh, but we met again after the competitions. Naruto rested fully in his chair before continuing. The Indigo League only took a week, and I still needed some Pokemon from the Hoenn region back then, so we decided to meet up in Hoenn. We traveled through Hoenn, Unova, and Kalos before we decided to split up. I had to come back to challenge the Elite Four, and she was doing the same thing in Sinnoh. Wait, Max added. What do you mean she was doing the same thing in Sinnoh? Naruto sighed with a chuckle. She challenged the Sinnoh Elite Four at the same time I did the Kanto and Johto. He couldn't help but laugh at the other's surprise. When we traveled, we always used the region's gyms to track our progress, and we got badges from every gym. She originated from Sinnoh and decided to compete with her badges in the Sinnoh League. He smiled as he remembered their battles. She won pretty easily, if I remember correctly. Naruto saw that Max was starting to see the truth. We were both 14 by then, and we decided to take 2 years to train before challenging the Elite Four in our respective regions. And after our trip, I came back to battle our Elite Four while challenging Sinnoh. So what happened? Ash asked. Did she win? Naruto smiled and nodded. Yeah, he did. Wait, Brock began. As she beat the Sinnoh Elite Four? Yeah, but that would mean. Misty stammered as Naruto's smile grew. It's Cynthia, the Sinnoh region champion. Max shouted as loudly as she could as she jumped to her feet. Mei, Misty, and Mito were all in shock as Max quickly gasped. You two were traveling partners? Naruto ran his fingers through his hair with a laugh. Yeah, I'm actually surprised that no one actually knows about us. I mean, I sat in the trainer viewing area when Cynthia was battling in the Sinnoh League, and she was right next to me when she was competing in the Indigo Plateau. And we usually challenge gyms together, so most of the gym leaders in every region we visited should know about us. Naruto missed the looks of shock and awe on the young trainers' faces as he continued. We even conducted an interview together. Sure, we weren't champions back then, but I was sure some reporter or journalist would dig up the old footage and spread it. Minato chuckled as Kushina interrupted his son with a sigh. You really should be grateful for being so lucky, young one. Wait! Mito shouted. Go back to the part where you traveled with Cynthia, the champion of Sinnoh. The girl lightly punched her brother's arm with a small pout. Why didn't you tell me? I honestly thought you knew, sister. No, I didn't. The young redhead was jumping up and down as she looked at her brother. I can't believe you know one of my idols so well. How come you didn't bring her home? I really want to meet her. Mito had always admired powerful female trainers, especially those who received worldwide recognition. Cynthia was probably her favorite trainer, narrowly edging out Diantha, the Kalos region champion. When's the next time you'll see her? Naruto chuckled. I'm not sure. He muttered as he thought, in about a month. Max slumped back in his chair. Wow, I can't believe two of the youngest world champions traveled together for so long. You two must have a crazy training schedule or something, right? The boy had stars in his eyes at the prospect. So you have some kind of super secret to getting super strong or something? Ash and the others seemed excited by that. I mean, you both became champions and surpassed so many people when you were so young. There are no secrets, but we always battle each other and improve that way. Naruto smiled at the reminder of all his battles with her. In all my travels, Cynthia is probably the toughest challenge I've had to face. Her fighting strategy is unlike any other I've ever seen, and she has a true passion for Pokemon. Her battle prowess lies not only in the strength of her Pokemon, but also in their bond. He chuckled. I haven't battled her in a long time, but her Garchomp is nothing to be taken lightly. Ash smiled. I'm going to travel to Sinnoh after the battle frontier. Maybe I'll get a chance to meet Cynthia and challenge her to a battle. Naruto nodded with a smile. Then you better start training as strong dragon type or ice type. Mito leaned closer to her brother. When did you meet Cynthia? Naru and I? We met in the Johto region when I was around 10 years ago. The others were once again surprised at how long the two champions had known each other. I wasn't exactly a polite young man back then, and I was quite arrogant. Kushina and Minato chuckled at the reminder. Cynthia and I got off to a bad start, and ended up fighting out of spite. Flashback in. Again! A young man ordered sternly. Don't stop until you destroy that rock! A Charmeleon growled as it rushed towards the large rock, its claws extended with a fiery red glow. The dragon claws sliced through the rock like a hot knife, slicing into the large boulder with each strike. The sounds of grating rocks made the teen flinch a little, but he felt powerful as his Pokémon tore around him. He could only smile as his Charmeleon roared before slamming its claws deep into the rock, shattering it to pieces at once. It had its own smile on its face that mirrored its trainer's, and it extended its claws proudly as they erupted with power and heat. Good work, Amaterasu! The trainer brushed her long blonde hair back and fixed her short ponytail, but her front strands were still spiky and unruly. We're done with Dragon Claw today, she said proudly as she petted her Pokémon's head, smiling as its flame flared with pride. But I want to get more done before lunch, so let's start Fire Blast early today. The climate of the Johto region was colder than Kanto's, but the trainer had quickly grown accustomed to it. He had really grown to enjoy the nature of the Sinnoh region. They had much larger natural obstacles that were well suited to powerful attacks. Instead of simple trees and small boulders, Amaterasu could use tall, wide mountains to train on. The wild Pokémon were also much more diverse in their own way, and they were good opponents for his Pokémon, although only a few of them were worth catching, a Larvitar and a Sneasel. They needed a lot more training before they could compare to Amaterasu, but they clearly had potential. So, overall, his visit to Johto before continuing in the Indigo League was a very successful decision. Fire explosion at the rock near the river! An inferno erupted in the fire Pokémon's jaws as it roared with power and tore, incinerating the short grass as it transformed into an all-consuming firestorm that engulfed the rock. A shroud of steam shot out from the point of impact instantly as the water around the rock evaporated, and the trainer watched in anticipation as the steam settled, revealing a half-melted stone that was a fraction of the size it had been before. Fine, but we need to work until we melt the entire rock. Amaterasu blasted the next rock, but instead of melting, it was less durable and burst into pieces. Do you care? A sudden voice shouted from behind. The blonde boy turned around and saw a girl staring at him, looking a little angry and annoyed as she flicked her long blonde hair behind her. She looked to be around his age, 10 or 11, and was actually quite pretty, but the stern look on her face was quite annoying. She raised an eyebrow, crossed her arms, and leaned to the side, staring at him like he was a bug. No, I don't. He turned around and ignored her. Go on, Amaterasu! Hey, stop that! The girl stomped her feet angrily. We're having our own training session there and you're disturbing the peace. What do you need peace for, Hitch? What did you say? He sneered. Oh, you heard me. He turned to the girl and returned her steely gaze. Don't come demanding anything from me, and if you're not happy about it, too bad for you. You'd better shut up before I make you. He smiled. And how are you going to do that? The girl smiled and struck a challenging pose, looking quite confident. For the first time, Naruto turned to the girl, who was honestly very pretty in a pair of tight jeans, a simple blue shirt, and a white hoodie, especially with the row of poke balls strapped to her glowing belt. I'll kick your ass, Pokemon battle or otherwise. She picked up a pokeball and tossed it in front of her. Gabite, battle dance! The dragon Pokemon growled as it glared at Naruto, its fins glowing with power. A Gabite, huh? He muttered as Amaterasu stood in front of him, staring back at the dragon type. It's a pretty rare Pokemon in these parts. They're usually found in the Sinnoh region, the girl smiled. Yes, we are from the Sinnoh region. Well, I'm from the Kanto region, and it's time to teach you a lesson, Sinnoh girl, the girl sneered. Boys are the same everywhere. I've been putting macho boys like you in your places since I was a kid. He smiled as Amaterasu lit the flame on her tail. We'll see. End of flashback. Another vibration from his Pokenav made Naruto stop and turn his attention away from the group. Without letting the others look over his shoulder, he checked the new message with a small smile on his face. He had expected her to text him often, but not about such menial things. He quickly answered her question. Where is the can opener? So who won in the end? Mito asked urgently as Naruto paused. Naru and I. Naruto put away his device and shrugged. Honestly, we couldn't decide. His Gabite was very strong, as strong as Amaterasu back then. We continued to battle over and over throughout the day, healing and rehealing our Pokemon. In the end, we called it a draw and went to the Pokemon Center, Flashback in. The clearing looked like a molten wasteland, and the river was nearly blocked by the burning debris left by the long battle. The sunlight had disappeared hours ago, and now the only contributing light sources were the burning patches of grass and the several trees that were nearly reduced to ash. Soft grunts could still be heard as Charmeleon and Gabite stared at each other, both refusing to admit defeat after such a long engagement. They were both trembling with exhaustion and had wounds all over their bodies, but the intensity in their eyes didn't waver. They seemed as determined to win as they had been hours ago, just like their trainers. "We have to end this now," the young man said calmly. "The fires may be out, but we've caused too much damage and the local authorities should arrive soon." The girl nodded. "Good. How about one last attack to end things?" He nodded. Blue looked up at the gray as the night wind blew her blonde hair out of her eyes. Huge impact. Following the impact, another shockwave ripped through the area, instantly extinguishing the remaining fires, but also knocking the two trainers to the ground. In the darkness, the rubble finally settled and silence reigned. For a while, all the trainers heard was their own breathing and the sound of their Pokémon limping weakly toward them. Amaterasu fell into her trainer's arms and rested, just as Gabite did in hers. "Hey, Kanto boy," the girl began, breaking the silence. "What's your name? Isn't it polite to give your own name first before asking someone theirs? Oh, just answer me, idiot." He couldn't help but smile as he wrapped his arms around his Charmeleon. "My name is Naruto Namikaze from Pallet Town. I'm Cynthia Carolina, from Celestic Town." "You're really good, Cynthia," Naruto said with a sigh. "I've been through the entire Kanto region and defeated every gym without a single loss or draw. You're the first person to give me such a difficult challenge since the beginning of my journey." She let out a small laugh. "What a coincidence. You're also the strongest trainer I've encountered so far, and I came all the way from Sinnoh." Cynthia kissed Gabite on the head and hugged her. "I guess Pokemon battles aren't as boring as I thought. But don't get me wrong, you may be strong, but next time we battle, I'll be the winner." "That's an illusion," he replied simply. "I don't lose to anyone. You boys are always so arrogant," he muttered. "So pathetic," Naruto scoffed, and stood up with a groan. "Whatever, let's get out of here." He walked over to Cynthia with Amaterasu walking beside him. "We don't want to get caught doing so much damage. The last thing we need is to be detained in this city. I still have to finish my training here." He offered his hand to the girl. "And our two Pokemon need to visit the Pokemon Center." Cynthia stared at Naruto for a moment before accepting his hand. "Fine, but as soon as we have more training, we will finish this battle and decide a victor." Naruto smiled and nodded. "You got it." End of flashback. "And after that, we basically traveled together." Brock chuckled. "Man, you two must have argued even more than Ash and Misty." The two aforementioned teens smiled at each other in amusement. Naruto chuckled. "We didn't argue much, but we did have a battle almost every day. As much as I enjoyed winning back then, it was pretty nice to have someone so good to battle against." As they trained together, Amaterasu and her Gabite grew much stronger than before, and soon they both evolved into Charizard and Garchomp. "I guess you could say that without her as a traveling companion, my Pokemon wouldn't be as strong as they are now." He looked over at the clearing where his Pokemon was resting and smiled as he made out the light coming from Amaterasu's tail. "Our secret, if it could be known as a secret, would be that two rivals who traveled together for so long would grow stronger for each other." Kushina smiled. "Well, you got lucky with Cynthia, I really did." Naruto smiled back at his mother, catching the knowing smile on her face. "Where is Cynthia now?" Mito asked curiously. "Is she in Sinnoh?" Naruto nodded. "Yes, she has her duties as champion to fulfill. But she's not that busy. Champions don't have much to do for the most part except for the Elite Four challenging them for the title. So she mostly travels around the world, meeting new Pokemon and training new teams." Ash smiled. "Man, if she's really that good, I can't wait to challenge her myself." Max chuckled. "Ash, I think you're going to get your ass kicked." Naruto snickered along with the others. But then he felt his Pokenav vibrate again, but instead of a text, it was a call. "Excuse me, I have to accept this." He stood up and walked toward the main street that faced his house, failing to catch the smile on his mother's face as she whispered something in his father's ear, no doubt telling her husband about the latest discoveries in their son's love life. "Hey, do you miss me?" "Of course I miss you," a soft, caring voice said on the other end of the call. You have no idea how peaceful it is at home without you. Naruto casually turned around and saw that she was out of earshot. I miss you too, beautiful. But I must say, I'm having a great time here. Mito has really grown a lot, and I really miss my family and friends here. Well, that's good for you, but I'm bored as hell here. It sucks that Lucian challenged me again. If he didn't, I could have gone with you. You know, I was just telling the others about you. Naruto smiled softly. They don't actually know we've been traveling together for so long, and Mito was so excited when she found out I know you. I think when you meet her, she'll ask for your autograph. He looked at Mito, who was playing with her Charmander and Dratini. She really idolizes you, the grand champion of the Sinnoh region, Cynthia. I can't wait to meet her and your parents. She replied in a voice that practically made Naruto smile at her. We've been together for a long time and I think it's time to tell them about us. God knows we've been holding it back for too long. I'm not stalling, it's just slipping away. Naruto leaned against his parents' fence. But I'd like you to meet them too. I'm sure they'll love you. I'll come see you when I'm done battling, so about a month. Every time a member of the Elite Four challenges the champion, it would become a national event for that region. The largest stadium would be used, and tickets would be sold throughout the region, so it would at least take a month. My grandparents will be busy, but I'll bring my sister with me. Perhaps it was another secret that was hidden in plain sight. Cynthia's little sister actually lived in the Unova region. She moved there to pursue her career as a supermodel and as a Pokemon trainer. Alessa Carolina, the gym leader and supermodel, was actually Cynthia's younger sister. I think she's having a performance next month in Kanto, so it works out. I think it's the Grand Kanto Festival next month. My mom is participating in it. It was good. Really? Cynthia asked. Wow, now I really want to go. I've always been a fan of your mom, Cynthia laughed. I love you, Naruto. Naruto could only smile. I love you too, Cynthia. Chapter 4. It had been a long time since Naruto had seen his mother so hysterically worried, so long that he had almost forgotten how completely insane it made her look. The last time she was this upset was when he left home to begin his Pokemon journey, and she actually held him up for a full hour before she let him go. Watching her dote and cry over her other son was a unique experience. Instead of feeling a little sad and guilty, it made him feel actually warm. His mother was truly a loving and caring mother, and wanted nothing more than to have her children safe and home. Even with Minato holding her back, Kushina had her arms around her baby and continued to look at her, trying to find if there was anything she missed or was missing on her journey. Mom, don't worry, Mito whispered with a small smile. I've got everything packed and accounted for. And I won't be alone on the road. She continued as she gestured to Ash, May, Max, and Brock, who were all looking at Kushina with a bit of surprise. They'd been traveling for years now, so I'm sure I'll be fine, Ash nodded with a smile. Mito is right, Aunt Kushina. We'll make sure she's safe and well. We promise. Kushina sighed and nodded reluctantly. Okay, but you have to call us every night before going to bed. Mito smiled and nodded as her mother released her. I will, Mom. I promise. The girl patted her pants pocket, pointing to her Pokenav, where she'd saved her parents' number along with her brothers, and listed them as her first, second, and third speed dial numbers, respectively. Okay, I think you're ready to go, Kushina said as tears welled up in her eyes. Minato hugged his wife with one arm as he ruffled his princess's hair, smiling at her. I'm proud of you, Mito. Now have fun on your journey and be sure to treat your Pokemon well. I will, Daddy. Naruto smiled at his little sister as he walked toward her, looking down the path she would be walking on, and he couldn't help but remember the first time he left home. It was so many years ago, but it was still vivid in his memory. Like his sister, he had his Charmander by his side, and with a heart full of ambition and a mind full of knowledge, he was confident he would succeed. He knew his sister wasn't like him at all, but he was even more confident that she would make something of herself on her own terms, just like she had in his family. Good luck, Mito. Don't hesitate to call on me if you have any questions or problems. Naruto patted her head and smiled as she giggled at him. And make sure you train hard. Maybe when you're older, you can even beat Cynthia in a battle. Mito's smile grew. You got it, Nara and I. We'll see you in a month, Minato said with a loving smile to his princess. Okay. Mito started to approach her friends as they walked down the road. Bye-bye, Kushina sobbed. Goodbye, baby. Take care. I will. I love you. Naruto could only smile as his mother leaned against his father as soon as Mito was out of sight. It wouldn't be the first time he marveled at how loving and affectionate his parents were after so many years of marriage. They were still deeply passionate and in love. Despite his father's annoyance and the anger of other men, all of his mother's previous suitors trying to hit on his mother, they all knew there was no risk. There was no way Kushina would betray Minato's trust. That's how true and strong their marriage was. After so many years of being together with Cynthia, Naruto could only hope that they were as happy and at peace as his parents. Kushina suddenly pulled away from her husband's warm embrace and sent her son a stern glare. Naruto Namikaze! She shouted and ordered, making Naruto gulp. You will not be going anywhere for the next month and the month after that. I don't care if you're busy eating ice cream or traveling. You will be staying home with me and your father, and we will be living as a family. I will not be having my 2 babies away from home. The young champion gulped again. You got this, Mom. I don't plan on leaving for a while. Honestly, Naruto had really been hoping Cynthia would grow to love Pallet Town and wouldn't mind staying for a while. He'd wanted to show his childhood home to his lover for a long time, and it would be heavenly if she agreed to build a small house there. They'd still keep their apartment in Sinnoh and their villa in Unova, but having another house in Pallet Town would make it feel closer to home. In fact, I have something planned for next month. Hey, Naruto! A sudden voice called out before Minato or Kushina could ask more about their son. The professor told me to come bring this to you. Tracy, Professor Oak's assistant, smiled as she handed Naruto a small box. I wanted to keep this safe in the lab, but seeing how you're back, we thought it would be better for the egg if you kept it with you. Naruto gladly accepted the box. Thank you, Tracy. Please tell the old man I'll take good care of this. Of course. The assistant left quickly, trotting back to the lab. Kushina smiled at the sight, having calmed down by her daughter's departure. Oh, it really has been a long time since I've seen this. The mother of 2 will always remember how the strange Pokemon egg ended up inside Naruto's crib the moment he came home from the hospital. She and Minato had thought a stranger had entered the house and was in close proximity to their baby. It really scared them at the time. Minato had rigged his entire house with the most advanced security technology in the world to ensure nothing would harm his wife and child, but no signs of forced entry were ever detected. Seeing you with your pet egg again really makes me think of when you were a little kid. You were so cute grabbing the egg everywhere, including the bathroom, Naruto sighed. Please don't mention that, Minato chuckled. This egg sure brings back memories. You know, I've always thought the swirls on the egg resemble our old family symbol. Kushina rubbed her chin thoughtfully as everyone made their way back to her home. The Uzumaki clan adopted the use of the swirl for centuries, and it looks very close to the markings on the egg. She smiled. If this egg can really survive for that long, we could make it into a small family heirloom, her husband laughed. Sure, that would be a pretty interesting gift. Naruto looked at the egg. I wonder what kind of Pokemon is inside. Night came quickly, and Naruto found himself inside his childhood bedroom, smiling at the nostalgia. It had certainly been quite some time since he last saw his room, but nothing had changed over time. His mother had kept everything spotless. Just like before, the top of his dresser was stacked with photo frames depicting the various stages of his journey, his first badge, his first championship, and his Hall of Fame picture. Right next to the frames were all of his gym badges, all neatly packaged in badge cases for each region, and next to them was his Indigo League trophy. Almost all of his accomplishments, carefully placed inside his room. And now, with a strange sense of nostalgia and irony, his Pokemon egg rested next to all of those achievements. In a way, it was his constant, no matter how many years he'd been away or how much he'd changed. With a smile, Naruto sat down on his bed. Even after sleeping in it the night before, it was still much smaller than he remembered. Perhaps the bed he shared with Cynthia in their apartment was too big, but he wasn't used to being so close to the edges of the bed. But either way, he didn't feel as comfortable as he had when he was younger. He had the feeling that nothing had changed with the bed. It was him who had changed. He had grown to like softer beds and had loved having Cynthia snuggled up against him during the night. Without her, every bed would feel absent. Naruto was really starting to miss his lover, and couldn't help but grab his phone. After 4 long dial tones, she smiled at her love's silky voice. Do you miss me too much to sleep? Yes, he replied, his smile growing wider. I'm not used to not having you next to me in bed. Cynthia's giggle still sounded cute over the phone. Tell me about it. The bed is huge for just one person, and no matter how much I hug the pillow, it's just not the same. Over the years, the Sinnoh champion had grown accustomed to having her lover's warm body as her personal pillow. This makes me miss the time when we were stuck in Kalos and had to share a sleeping bag. It was a little strange for her back then, actually embarrassing since they hadn't started dating yet, but the cold night never felt warmer with Naruto's arms wrapped around her. Lucian is really going to pay for this in our battle. Naruto let out a small laugh. Kick his ass for me, baby. So how was your day? Cynthia asked as she lay in her usual bed, feeling a little warmer. Mito went on his trip, right? Yeah, she did this morning. Sitting down on his small bed, he continued. She'll be traveling with a group of friends around Kanto for a while and will meet us at the Indigo Plateau next month. Both champions smiled unknowingly as they thought of their days together in the Kanto region, backpacking, cooking for themselves in the forests, visiting amazing places, and challenging every gym. Man, this brings me back. Remember that time we went on that cruise in Vermilion City? How could I forget? That's when you decided to stand on the bow of the ship and almost fell into the water. He couldn't help but laugh at the memory. If Garchomp was even a little slower, you would have landed in the water and been killed. Naruto shared a laugh. Oh, we had a great time in Kanto. Mito is going to have a great time traveling. I think so too, but my parents are still pretty worried. Mom especially, she doesn't want her baby to get hurt in the real world. Cynthia nodded to herself. Well, I guess it can be a dangerous place. But she's with friends and they would look out for her. Naruto paused and wondered if he should speak his mind, and finally decided to do so. Hey, when you become a mother, do you think you'll find it difficult to let your child begin his journey? Cynthia surprised Naruto with her lack of hesitation. I'd surely be worried about them, but if they're like me, I wouldn't be too worried. Naruto smiled at her cheerful tone. But I'm sure their father's genes would make me worried. I wouldn't want any of my children going on a 20-mile hike across a frozen wasteland with barely enough gear to climb a small hill. Nor would I want to see them go spelunking in caves miles underground just so they could find a Pokemon fossil. Naruto smiled and got under the covers. So they've chosen the father yet, huh? Yes, but he's still a flight risk. Naruto could mentally see the cheerful smile on his lover's face. Nonetheless, he's cute and sweet. And on a good day, he can probably give me a decent fight. Not to mention he makes the best ice cream in the world. I heard that babies tend to inherit their mother's taste in food, so when I have kids, I'd want a man like that. Cynthia hugged her pillow, feeling very warm. The father, who should know who he is, should start training a Chansey for a nanny, because I want a big family. At least 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl. Only 4? Naruto added with a smile. I hope we have enough for a family Pokemon League. Cynthia laughed and rolled onto her bed. Then our apartment certainly wouldn't be big enough. We'd have to get somewhere else, a nice house with a big backyard in a quiet neighborhood where no pesky reporters would bother us. She let out another soft laugh. But anyway, why the sudden baby talk? Do you want to be a dad? I'd like to be a dad if you were the mom. Naruto turned off the lights and rested comfortably beneath his covers. That would be so nice. Imagine us and our kids living together in our house with all our Pokemon around. We can teach them how to ride on Pokemon's backs and how to make ice cream with Yuki and Chi-Chi. Cynthia could only smile at the thought of such a life. The kids will probably want to learn how to battle, but if our little one is anything like their mom, she'd kick her brothers' butts. There's not much blonde hair in the house. I would love to. Cynthia whispered into the phone. I want it more than anything. Naruto's smile was perpetual. I'd love to try. You know me, I've always been a fan of our nightly baby-making activities. Well, his beautiful girlfriend murmured in a sultry tone. If you make me a nice dinner and the Cynthia special next month, I'll definitely give you a fun night. Oh honey, I'd teleport back to Sinnoh now if I could. Cynthia laughed again. You can wait a month, baby. The Namikaze chuckled with a sigh. Oh, I love you, baby. I love you too. So, lying in the dark, cozy room, under his covers, Naruto chatted with Cynthia at night. It made them both feel more at home, which, for both of them, was where the other was. They might not be cuddled up with their legs tangled and all, but it was close enough. The least his other half's voice could do was provide them with a good night's sleep, and maybe a good dream. It was in Kalos, Lumio's city, the most romantic place in the region, also known as the City of Lights. In Naruto's entire life, that was probably one of his happiest days. Not only had he and Cynthia earned a Lumio's City Gym badge that very day, but they had a wonderful time touring the city. For once in their very busy lives, they took a break and spent the day having fun like normal people their age. They thought nothing of keeping track of their training schedule, their physical training regimen, their activity logs for future reference. They even turned down a few challenges from other trainers in the city. The entire day was accompanied by beautiful music and wonderful scenery. They didn't bother going to the Pokemon Center. Instead, they went to the Pokemon Boutique and shopped to their heart's content. Cynthia had never thought that her beloved Garchomp would look better with a pink bow around its neck or a simple crystal bracelet, but somehow it worked. Although Naruto had a much harder time trying to convince Amaterasu to wear a beret, every time she put the hat on, Charizard would burn it to ash. By the end of their shopping time, Naruto had to pay for over 10 hats. "Why did you buy another one?" Cynthia asked with an exasperated laugh. "She's already burned 10 berets. The 11th will end up the same. He can give up before I give up." The young man replied with a smile. "I'll get a picture of him wearing this. Come on," the girl murmured as she walked forward. "Let's find something to eat." The Kalos region was the 5th region Naruto and Cynthia had traveled through together, and it would likely be the last before they challenged the Elite Four of their respective regions. So far, it had become Cynthia's third favorite region, behind Sinnoh and Unova. The food was amazing, the people friendly, the Pokemon incredibly interesting, and the ice cream was almost as good as the ones in Sinnoh. And maybe traveling would feel different at 15 than it did at 11, but the entire region, especially Lumio's city, felt much more romantic than anywhere else. "I know a place," Naruto quickly replied. "It's called Sushi High Roller. Apparently it's the most famous restaurant in town, and it doesn't serve just anyone." Cynthia was intrigued when her best friend smiled. "It only welcomes Pokemon trainers who have earned the title of League Champion. It can be any of the major regions, but you must have won a Pokemon Major League to be eligible to eat at this restaurant." For once, their status as champions of both the Indigo and Sinnoh leagues came in handy for more than just their right to battle the Elite Four. That's not all, though. To receive service, the champions must battle against trainers hired by the restaurant, and if they manage to win, they can have the most luxurious food in the restaurant for free. And the final twist, Cynthia beamed and smiled. "That sounds very interesting." She gave Naruto a look. "We're getting a free dinner, Indigo League champion." Maybe the restaurant made some mistakes when they hired the trainers to take on the champions, because they didn't really do their job. Naruto let Cynthia go first, because ladies first, and she had a battle against a girl named Salantha. The Kalos girl was decent and probably much better than the usual trainer, but against Cynthia's Garchomp, Milotic, and Lucario, she was lucky she lasted a minute. Maybe because she was angry about having to wear a pink ribbon, but Cynthia's Garchomp was much more aggressive than usual and managed to take out 2 of Salantha's 3 Pokemon herself with a very powerful Giga Impact. Then, that last one fell almost immediately after a barrage of 2 Brick Breaks and a Dragon Tail. Cynthia was kind enough to wait for Naruto before ordering, and the restaurant did its best to make her wait. The owner himself came out of the room and confronted Naruto. His name was Kazu, and he looked a bit like Jervis, Cynthia's butler in Unova. She thought he felt the need to protect his restaurant's good name and tried to defeat Naruto, but she had no idea that triple battles were Naruto's specialty. More than once, Cynthia had thought to herself that Naruto could be the greatest trainer in the world when it came to triple battles. All of their teams were built as cohorts, and each member would enhance the other's strength. So, with his 2 Greninja and Gudra, Naruto wiped the floor with Kazu. It wasn't as short as Cynthia's battle, but it was only longer by 10 seconds. "Man, they really have good food here." Naruto took a sip from a glass of soda while patting his stomach. "I haven't eaten this much in a long time." Cynthia was halfway through her 5th ice cream and nodded with a smile. "Yeah, even Pokemon food is great." All 12 of her Pokemon were provided with as much food as they could eat and nearly cleaned the restaurant. Amaterasu finished 8 servings alone. And this ice cream, the Indigo League champion smiled fondly at his best friend. I bet you'd rather have a lifetime supply of ice cream than become the champion of Sinnoh. After taking a nice photo for the restaurant to put on its wall of fame, the duo left with full stomachs and smiling faces. They wandered around the city and took in the beautiful night lights. Prism Tower, where they had both received their badges a few hours ago, acted as a tall beacon as they walked through the busy streets filled with young couples and small families. It was unlike any other city they had visited before. None came close. They walked a full circle around the city, from North Boulevard to South Boulevard and back to North again, talking and laughing the whole way, eating ice cream from every vendor who sold it. But finally, they experienced their first streak of bad luck that day, or did they? The Richesheim Hotel was completely full and had no vacancies due to the large volume of tourists, as did all the other inns and motels in the area. Cynthia suggested they go to the Pokemon Center and spend the night there, but Naruto had another idea. You're joking, right? Oh, come on. It's no big deal, and look at the view from here. Naruto had his Goade teleport the two of them near the top of the Prism Tower, right on a nice, big balcony. It overlooked the entire city and offered an amazing view of the clear night sky. Don't worry about falling. This is a balcony, and we won't be rolling over the 3-foot glass railings. But I tore my sleeping bag last week, remember? I threw it away a few days ago. Cynthia sighed. Let's go to the Pokemon Center and you can share my sleeping bag. Cynthia almost choked. What? There's plenty of room, she said with a small blush as she approached the girl. And I really want to do this. Come on, don't you want to spend an evening overlooking the City of Lights, just the two of us, looking at the stars on the ground and in the sky? Cynthia's blush almost shone as brightly as the buildings below. This is the most romantic city we've ever been to, and I don't want to miss this opportunity. Fine. The sleeping bag may have looked out of place, but having Naruto's arms wrapped around her felt perfect. It was warm and cozy, and that's when Cynthia realized just how amazing a pillow Naruto made. She didn't care about the scenery, and neither did Naruto. She was a little overwhelmed by how good it felt to be so close to her best friend. She never lied this close to him before. She could feel his heartbeat against her cheek. In that moment, right before they both fell asleep in each other's arms, they knew they were madly in love with each other. The sound of crashing waves was thunderous and made Naruto wake up with a jolt, but he immediately realized that he was no longer lying in his sleeping bag with his beautiful girlfriend. No, he was standing up. And most importantly, he was no longer in his room, or in Pallet Town. Anywhere near the small town would one find waves this violent and powerful. The ground shook as tons of water roared in defiance, and Naruto felt weak and feeble as he stood atop a cliff, as if the ground was a mere weak shield against the almighty assaults of the sea. And like any weak shield, the ground shattered. As he fell into the dark waters and the strong winds brushed against his face, he felt no fear. Lightning from the black clouds lit up the sea in a series of flashes and revealed to him the great whirlpool forming. It was gigantic, almost a mile in diameter, and spawned 60-foot waves in its wake. It was a maelstrom. It was deafening, the wind, the thunder, and the roaring waves. Such was the power of nature. Just before Naruto plummeted into the deadly vortex, something passed underneath him and took him away. Wow, we're not ready for that yet, fish cake! Naruto had no idea what was happening, but he realized he was riding on the back of a Pokemon. It had long wings that stretched magnificently out to the sides and a broad back that provided him more than enough room. It had a white body that had small blue fins along its back and was powerful. Naruto felt the winds conform and obey the Pokemon's movements, and the waves followed after its soaring. Who are you? Her head was starting to hurt seriously, and she struggled to get the words out, but she needed to ask. You mean you still don't recognize me? Naruto didn't know why, but he felt like he should know the Pokemon's name. You named me so many years ago. How can you forget? It's me, Susanoo. Naruto's eyes widened as an old memory rushed into his mind. Susanoo was what he called his egg when he was 5 years old. His grandfather had just finished telling him a story about an ancient clan of people who worshipped a storm and sea god whose name was Susanoo, and he decided to name his first Pokemon after such a powerful deity. You remember me now, right? Of course you do. You wouldn't forget your first Pokemon, and you were never born. He muttered as he blew, the pressure making his pain worse. And whose fault was that? The Pokemon flew higher and higher into the sky and soon broke through the thunderclouds, reaching the top of a clear blue sky. I was ready to hatch, but you never were. I've been trying to reach you ever since I could talk. But would you listen? No. You were always researching and reading about other Pokemon and how to make them as strong as possible. Then, when you were older, you went off and started training all those Pokemon and you completely forgot about me. And no matter how much I tried to visit you, you were always too far away. And the few times you came back to town, all you had on your mind was that girl. Naruto was almost unconscious from the pain, but he strained to listen. Miraculously, you came back 2 days ago and you were finally in the right frame of mind. My communications finally reached you. What does that mean? It means you have to wake up now. The Pokemon muttered before lunging forward and throwing Naruto over the back. Go find me because I'm finally going to be born, Naruto screamed as he fell from the sky and hurtled through the clouds, but soon passed out. Naruto woke up with a jolt, for real this time. Subconsciously, he was immediately relieved that Cynthia wasn't sleeping next to him. The last thing he wanted was to throw her out of bed. But that thought merely lingered for a few brief seconds as he jumped out of his bed and sped over to his vanity. It was dark and his eyes were blurry, but he faintly heard something shaking or vibrating. His heart pounding through his chest due to sleep, he still hurried to turn on the lights before running back to the egg, rubbing his eyes to see clearly. Oh my God! He muttered to himself as he opened the box the egg rested in. This is actually happening. The egg was causing all the tremors and vibrations, but that wasn't the strangest phenomenon. It was actually glowing. A bright blue light was emitting from within the shell, and even with its bright yellow lights on, it showed brilliantly in the room. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat. And it was getting brighter and brighter, along with the increasingly violent tremors and vibrations. Naruto watched in amazement as the egg began to expand, one side stretched out, as if something was trying to push through the shell from the inside. Some of his badge cases began to fall off the dresser, and his trophies fell to the floor, causing Naruto to take a step back. What's going on? A sudden voice asked, making Naruto jump. What are you doing, son? It's the middle of the night, Naruto. Dad, Mom! Naruto exclaimed with a vigor that surprised his parents, who were standing by his door. Come here! The champion noticed his parents' expression change from stunned to shocked and amazed. The egg! It's moving and shaking! I think it's finally going to hatch! Minato immediately reached into his pocket and extended his pokenav, filming the entire scene. I can't believe this! I actually never thought anything would come out of this egg. Why is it glowing? Kushina whispered as she held her husband's arm. And shaking so violently? Everyone gasped as the first crack appeared on the egg's surface, a tiny spider crack. But soon more appeared, each one larger than the last. Then the glow became perpetual and began to shine brighter and brighter until the shell burst open. Minato hugged Kushina and shielded her from the pieces of shell, and Naruto stood in front of his parents to keep them safe, but there was no danger, and everyone was sure of that as they turned to see the hatched egg. Shut up, Lugia!
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.